According to the FBI, in 1998, 932,185 people disappeared in the United States. The most powerful and best organized police in the world could not solve 1,322 cases for that year. So these people continue to be missing, and each year they sink further into oblivion. One of those cases could have been that of Guzman Quiñones, without accent mark on the A and without the worm of the any, if it had not been for the fact that the most powerful and best organized police in the world did not even register his disappearance. Only I and 5 other people in this world know that Guzman was not murdered in Los Angeles on December 13, 2013, as reported by various newspapers in the region, but 15 years earlier in New Orleans, on June 3, 1998. Although the author of the recent shot in the neck of the well-known Hollywood choreographer is not yet known, I have no doubt that it is Roque Hernandez, who graduated that same year in business and with double residency in Bermuda and Panama City, Florida, where he's probably been into motel, prostitution, and cheap rum business. When I read the short note from the Los Angeles Times that Google News Alerts sent me about the choreographer in my email, I was hesitant about what to do. I've gotten used to thinking 1,000 times about the most trivial facts that come my way. I have learned that the most important decisions, those that can cause a radical change in a person's life or bring them to a hasty end, are always made thinking that they are not. Finally, after several hours, I flew to Los Angeles and, after a couple of failed attempts, managed to locate his grave the next day, in Montecito Heights. An official told me the place, and it was only when I was left alone that I was able to confirm it.
Guzman Quiñones. Born, June 29, 1974, died, December 13, 2013.
Only 6 people. 7 if I include his own father, who preferred to accept the story that his son was the same one who sent him money and Christmas cards from the United States every year, know that Guzman died in 1998. Only 5 know where he is buried, although until today no one has been willing to share their version of events. The reason is very simple. His traveling companions in a very few days were swept away by the vertigo of events, first, and then by the cowardice of a group of young people who had just emerged from the wonderful bubble of the university, and were not prepared to give up a future of successful men and women, fathers and mothers who attend church every Sunday like someone who takes dirty clothes to the laundry once a week. We were swept away, I should have said. God knows if this tendency to remember in the third person is not the consequence of years of struggle with the ghost of Guzman. As soon as I finished reading the tombstone and was able to get out of the steam of several memories, I realized a mistake. In the thick fog that morning I could see a distant profile, like a small dark flame among the trees. At that distance and in those conditions, it was impossible to distinguish anyone, much more so when your eyes are filled with tears. But right away I realized that the dark flame was watching me. It was even more evident when I began to walk quickly between the graves and the shadow. I could see now that he was wearing a dark overcoat, was walking in my same direction. I tripped 2 or 3 times until I found a little path and then managed to get away from who, I was sure, was Roque. Okay, someone might ask, Roque had managed to locate me, but why would he follow me in that way in a cemetery, where surely there were other people to ask for help? That question could only be asked by someone who has not met Roque. For those of us who knew him, it was obvious. He never threatened me with death, because a true warrior always leaves women alive, he said, words more, words less. Roque wanted to intimidate me, he wanted to let me know that he was behind my steps, that I myself, as I had assured myself in Alabama, would end up letting me find myself to shorten the agony, which was soon to overtake me as cave hunters did, as still the Bushmen do in the Kalahari Desert, driving away their prey, forcing it to flee indefinitely until it falls exhausted. Today, January 11th, after almost a month in the deepest sadness, refusing to leave my apartment for long days, I have seen him for the second time. This time I could see his face in the crowd that flows down Broadway at that time, looking into my eyes for a fraction of a second, with that mocking and defiant smile as always. It was at the height of the Times Square subway station. I can tell the exact station since it makes no sense to keep hiding. I left Los Angeles first and San Francisco later to put distance between me and that ghost a few years ago. Since then, I have lived renting so that my whereabouts are never known. In the jobs I had, I always used my middle and second last name, something that I had never done before, but for Anglos it is natural. At least I no longer had to clarify that we Hispanics have two surnames and that the first is not the second name. But his perseverance reveals the size of his illness. I'm sure he doesn't just follow me. The other 5 members of the trip have disappeared from any data source available on the internet, not by chance. Now that I know that Guzman has died a second time and in the same way, I better understand the seriousness of the danger. Someone will wonder why no one ever dared to denounce Roque. The answer is somewhat complex and needs me to stop to explain some things first, and, since I now have time, all the time that someone who has freed herself from her own future can have, then I will get to work. Not only will I explain in detail everything or the little that I know, but I will also show the world and, above all, myself, that if up until now I have been what Sonia called a dead mosquito, it has been because of my bad woman education, because of the founding fears of childhood, perhaps, not because of a constitutional weakness in my DNA. Lack of courage and I were the same person all my life, and now I will be remembered, if anyone ever remembers me, for a single act of courage. I will tell the truth about that 1998 trip and sleep with Daniel S. Obviously, this is a false name, although the initials are the same. I put it like this just so that 2 or 3 people I know can understand this boy better, and, if it helps them, they can understand me too. Although I doubt that anyone cares too much about understanding someone else. In general, the people I know and all those I suspect I know on social networks are first of all interested in being understood, and not a few are only interested in being admired and flattered. But since our time is characterized not only by a pathological narcissism but also by its apparent opposite, by a no less pathological voyeurism, I imagine that many will want to know more details about Daniel, even if they are absolutely useless details for the purposes of this story. For all those, I will only say that Daniel was one of my best students in college and that just a year ago I learned that he was very ill, the product of sharing a syringe with one of those criminals who will never go to jail, for destroying the lives of innocent people full of future, something that is a very common rule in our decent societies where law and injustice reign. More details are irrelevant. Nor the mysteries, he will not be the last man with whom I share my intimacy. I am not saying this because it is in my plans to confuse life with excesses. It is something more useful and easier to understand. I will help him to die having met a woman whom, for the wrong reasons, he admired with passion and obsession, and he will help me to die knowing that justice was served, which, after all, is the least that any human being deserves. My only regret is that to do justice I have to resort to a new lie, such as telling poor Daniel that because of a similar error I find myself in the same situation, that my days are also numbered. Sure, counted like anyone's days, it will be said, but this existential truth does not cancel out a concrete lie. Only a hypocrite can deny the irrefutable fact that there is a vast genre of lies ranging from the most cowardly and criminal to the most heroic. Perhaps in the high courts and in the academy the only thing that matters is the truth and nothing but the truth, but that can never be true for justice, plain and simple, in a world where lies reign. Pretending to fight a big lie with little truths is as toxic as trying to cure malaria by taking a whole bottle of aspirin. I have written to Daniel, and he has already answered me. He was surprised, but I think that, because of the exclamation points and those hieroglyphs that young people use today, he was very happy to hear from me. He apologized for the last email he sent me a few years ago, an inappropriate note, according to him, the fault of a beer night. Obviously, he knows less about me than I know about him. I replied that he had nothing to apologize for, that I was actually thinking of inviting him a beer. We arranged to meet at the Starbucks on 6th and 42nd, this Saturday at 6 in the afternoon. Then we will go for a walk. I know some tables in Bryant Park where students drink beer from huge paper coffee cups, with certain complicity with the policeman who follows the secret tradition of his predecessors. They are not betrayed by the coffee cups or the joy that occurs so easily at that age, but by the frequency with which they go to the bathroom. I used to go to those places, although little by little I began to feel uncomfortable. Not because men and women looked at me, but the opposite. There should be a crime of harassment for indifference. Despite everything, as I watched that crowd of people go by, I felt, that they were all unfamiliar faces and more human than the hundreds of friends I had on social networks. I could not eliminate any of them with a click, but they depressed me much less. I discovered that, especially in those beautiful spaces full of people and nature, it particularly bothered me to see so many young people bent over, prostrate on their smartphones, that little by little they began to invade the parks and the entire city. People texting each other or someone who was at a cafe 2 blocks away, people buying clothes online at the corner store. The zombies, who naturally believe they are very alive and intelligent, because their parents and their professors at school have done nothing but repeat how clever they were, to provide them with great self-esteem or to make them decide one day to do their tasks, and because no one ever dared, neither the best of friends nor the worst of their enemies, to tell them to stop lying to their chubby children, those zombies, I said, no longer even go to the stores to buy clothes or to bookstores to buy books or to bars to chat with friends. Now everything is more effective, you buy and talk and have orgasms online, so in the age of 3-dimensional printers, people begin to abandon 3-dimensional spaces to have a life, or something similar, in 2 dimensions, while their thought, or something similar, becomes a linear, non-dimensional, online reality when not a dotted, fragmented line. Thus, robots every day are more like human beings and humans are more like robots every day. We only need to think and speak in computer code, with zeros and ones, nothing more. John, 00110111. Mary, 1001001. John, 01. Mary, 1111001111. But let's put personal frustrations aside. Specifically, the appointment with Daniel means that I have some time to get down to work when it comes to explaining the matter of Guzman, Roque, and the trip. I have on my table, waiting for several hours, the box that accompanied me, always sealed, throughout all these years. There are my diaries, photos, hotel and gas receipts, a few books, probably my grandmother's watch that I lost around the same time, and the 22 cassettes recorded by Guzman that I will start listening to as soon as I get a cassette player, in one of the many thrift stores in Manhattan. I will only change some names to protect the identity and the right to lie of some involved. Spring 1998. The chaotic diary I interrupted on June 27, 1998, chaos that revealed my less feminine side, in Guzman's words, confirms that we met for the first time, the 7 of us, on Thursday, May 21st at the restaurant on Beach Boulevard and Oceanfront Street in Jacksonville Beach to fine-tune travel details. We all knew each other more or less from college, but the 7 of us had never been together at the same table, in the same place. I observed that in this detail, which must have gone unnoticed by the rest, there was something disturbing, unknown. It was as if they were each someone else or they weren't exactly the same people I had met separately. Suddenly, when I noticed it, I felt uncomfortable, although I attributed it to my pathological shyness, to that weakness of character that I supposed I was going to combat with experiences like that. Sarah asked me if I was feeling bad and I told her that I was a bit stunned by the music, and the waitresses who would line up every so often to dance Macarena, clapping their hands and showing us their beautiful buttocks, some cheekily and others with obvious shyness. Anyway, I tried to think, I didn't give to worry, the trip was going to last a summer month, which are the shortest months, and, in the worst case scenario, anyone could get off at any time if things were not of interest to them. We discussed the itinerary, gas, and lodging, voting rules and a very basic code of conduct that, more than preventing disputes and conflicts, imposed on us the obligation to enjoy every minute of the I-10 highway. At that time, we lived in a state of almost permanent excitement that was scary. Later, from some authorized study at some university, I learned that those levels of ecstasy, such as the social phobias and unjustified nerves of youth, do not recover more until maturity. As long as, I would add, life has not been in charge of posing us problems without resolution or problems that require so much time and care that when they are solved one no longer knows how to live again or where to find again that zest for life, that vertigo of being alive. At that age, life is a roller coaster, but not because it is unstable and exaggerated is it less real than the final balance that corpses reach. I recognize myself in the photos of that time, when we were incredibly young, when we were ourselves or, more important than that, when we knew what we wanted to be. I do not recognize myself in that worn mask that is now being returned to me by the stained glass windows where little adolescent dresses are displayed, that defeated mask in the mirrors of shoe stores and public toilets. Mirrors full of cheerful girls who smile confidently as if they had made a pact of no aggression with fate. That afternoon, with the music, the beer and the false anger flowed, we planned the trip. The itinerary had to include several exceptions, detours, opportunities to see as many places as possible within a reasonable distance of Interstate 10. Several of these exceptions were crossed out to satisfy Sonia's mother, who suffered from the idea that her daughter could be close to the dreaded border with the Wild South. In those first hours, the profiles of each one of us began to be drawn, those characteristics that really matter in a person and that never appear even suggested in social gatherings or in brilliant resumes. Rather, they were blurry sketches. What seemed clear was that Carlos or Steven, one of the two, was going to end up leading the group, especially when it came to appropriating good ideas and quietly taking distance from the catastrophic decisions that followed.